But we begin tonight with a lawsuit that the U.S. Department of Justice filed this month against the state of New Mexico and city of Albuquerque over how they're legislating their roles, or lack thereof, in immigration enforcement. We gathered the co-sponsors of the state and city laws that the DOJ say infringe on the federal government's authority to discuss their reactions and next steps. A little later, we're going to hear from Democratic State Representative Eleanor Chavez, who carried the state's Immigrant Safety Act across the finish line in February. But first, I sit down with Albuquerque City Councilor Joaquin Baca, co-sponsor of the Safer Community Places Ordinance, which Mayor Keller signed just last month, to learn about what it does, why Baca felt it was needed, and how he feels now that the feds are pushing back. Councilor Baca, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Albuquerque already had an immigrant-friendly city policy in place that prevented city resources from being used for immigrant enforcement. Why was this additional policy needed?
I think just the situation throughout our nation has changed drastically. It used to be that you would have ICE, you'd have law enforcement, and now you have a situation where people are being snatched off the road. People are being killed, essentially, and so this isn't. We're no longer in normal times.
The immigrant-friendly city policy, it's a resolution. This was an ordinance. So did this codify certain parts of the immigrant-friendly policy, and did it add anything new?
So the policy already existed, of course, the ordinance. This is adding to it. Part of it is mirroring what the county has already done, codifying what the mayor had previously done as an executive order. And just putting that into law.
Can we get into some specifics? What does it do?
So this one, two main things. Essentially, one, can't use city resources to assist ICE. So essentially, parking lots, buildings, they can't use them for staging, and directs the city to create policies on what that looks like, and how staff have to deal with that. The other part is directing businesses to also create signage for if ICE comes to check employees or what their rights are and so forth.
Okay. And now, last year, the U.S. Attorney General at the time, Pam Bondi, put Albuquerque on a list of so-called sanctuary jurisdictions, right, and basically announced an intent to sue these jurisdictions. The council, I imagine you would say, knew that this was coming, this lawsuit.
Right.
So was passing this ordinance, especially when you already had the resolution, the immigrant-friendly policy in place, unnecessarily antagonistic to the Trump administration, if you knew that this threat was sitting there?
I wouldn't say necessarily antagonistic. I think the Trump administration, by coming out and saying we're going to file suit against all these cities regardless, lumping our immigrant-friendly, saying it's essentially the same as sanctuary, which it's not technically. I think that was a little forward on their part, maybe not a little, a lot. For our part, it is, Albuquerque hasn't had to deal with like Minneapolis or
right,
Portland, of course, and I, for one, think, we don't need to get out there and be assertive in that sense. But it is important for us to protect our citizens, to protect our constituents, to make sure that people can go to school, can go to work, can call 911 and not be afraid. Mm-hmm. Or it is our job for the welfare of citizens of Albuquerque, and so at least creating those tools and those spaces and clarifying our own policies, I think, is important.
And so for you don't feel like this ordinance was assertive in the sense that you're talking about, that you don't feel like was necessary for Albuquerque to do?
I think it's our job to create policies that protect our citizens, that keep the fear out of them. Given this change in the political climate, and what the Trump administration is doing, I think it's important for us to be proactive for our people.
All right. Well, let's get into the Trump administration's complaint a little bit. I'll mention it. It doesn't name you. It does mention it names the city of Albuquerque and Mayor Tim Keller when it comes to this city ordinance, that aspect of the suit. It argues the policy is, quote, not merely a political disagreement or passive abstention. It is deliberate, disruptive action that jeopardizes the public safety of all Americans. What's your reaction to that statement?
I mean, talking about, ridiculous, aggression, so to speak. It's not, we're just saying we're following up what we already do, right? Our immigrant-friendly policy already states that we will not provide resources. It doesn't say we're going to fight you. It doesn't say we're going to stop you. It simply says we're not collecting data and we're not going to be helping you. This is just adding a little bit to that, saying our city properties are not for use in this manner, which the city is completely within their legal right to do.
What's your take on the deliberate disruptive action piece of that?
How disruptive are we if we're not saying ICE can still do its job, and they are doing their job in Albuquerque, even though it's not like other places, and we're not stopping that. We're simply saying you're not going to use our resources to do those activities.
And so that is one of the arguments that they made, that you're stopping it, basically. The Justice Department makes a few different arguments about why the policy is unconstitutional in their opinion. I'd like your reaction to them. Two cite the Supremacy Clause, which is what states that the federal law trumps, pardon the pun, the local laws. The DOJ argues that a local regulation can't create an obstacle to Congress's objectives and can't regulate the federal government, which they argue in this case you're doing by controlling the property and resources available to ICE. Right. So was standing in ICE's way from doing its job one of your goals? And if so, why should the city be able to do that? Why are you in your right to do that?
Right. So one, the Supremacy Clause only counts if it is not violating the Constitution. Arguably, denying people their due process rights is denying is violating the Constitution.
If the federal law isn't violating the Constitution,
correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So does the federal government have standing in this case? I would argue no. But also, we're not stopping them from doing their job. Right? They can still go do what they're tasked to do, and they are doing that. We're simply saying we're not using our resources, and the city is more within its right to control its property, its departments, and its money. So we're not disrupting them. We're not stopping them. They're still doing it, and they are. And we're just not letting them use our resources.
Well, the federal government, in addition, is alleging discrimination. Yeah. Because the ordinance singles out federal law enforcement for, quote, worse treatment than state and local law enforcement officials. What's your take on that?
I think it's laughable.
Why
discriminating against the federal government. I think there's been cases in the past that have shown that you can't discriminate against the federal government. That said, on their own thing, they've talked about, these are voluntary agreements between their law enforcement, our law enforcement, to create public safety. Voluntary by definition means we're agreeing to work on something, but we don't have to work on something. It's based on what we voluntarily agree to. So in this case, you can't discriminate someone if I'm voluntarily saying I'm going to step away from a voluntary agreement.
I think part of the argument is that the ordinance singles out federal law enforcement officials, saying, an ICE agent can't use this property to stage, but our state police could, or our APD could. Right. And so how is, if that's the argument, how is that constitutional to say federal agents are different from state and local?
They are different, right? I mean, APD is funded and regulated by the city of Albuquerque, right, period. And we can voluntarily work with agencies as we see fit to protect our constituents and citizens. That's fundamental. So saying we're not going to add support is different from saying we're going to have them obstruct you. And in this case, we're not obstructing them. They're still doing what they need to do.
And so it's a jurisdictional difference between the federal agents and otherwise.
Correct. So similar to somebody's private property, you can't just go on somebody's private property and tell someone what to do with their private, including the federal government. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of kind of treatment of federal agents here in Albuquerque, District Attorney Sam Bregman, Bernalillo County District Attorney, who's also running for governor, he said that he would prosecute ICE agents who detain people without legal justification. What do you make of his argument to do that? And would you support Albuquerque police arresting an ICE agent if they had a warrant?
Right. I think nobody should be violating the law, myself included, right? If I violate the law, then I should be held accountable. Our federal employees, because that's what they are, whichever agency they are, should be held accountable. Can District Attorney Bregman actually do that? I don't have the answer to that. I do support him though, I'll say that. When you see images of TV of people just being taken off the streets without any kind of identification, without any warrants, I mean, clearly their due process rights are being violated. And that's not even talking about the humanitarian issues here. I mean, it's just ridiculous that we exist in this world. You know, especially when you see video now of people being shot on the streets. So those people should be held accountable, absolutely.
You support Bregman's approach. Would you support Albuquerque police seeing through those warrants?
Those are two different questions. I also, as a person, as just Joaqui Baca, yeah, absolutely, I would. As a city councilor, we got to follow the law, and we need to stick with that. So that's a different question.
What about enforcement of the city ordinance?
We're not enforcing it yet. I mean, the bill said we had 90 days to come up with those policies, which we're not there yet. Me personally, do I think we should enforce it? Yes. As a counselor that has to follow the law, we're not yet at a point where we can enforce it. We haven't yet come up with those rules and policies, both for the city employees and businesses.
What's a realistic timeline, despite the lawsuit, for that to take
well,
place?
for ordinance, 90 days to come up with the rules. Then, of course, working with community and city staff. So you're looking at, you know, government moves slowly. You add another 60 days to the 90 days, so 5-6 months out.
Okay. If this lawsuit were still playing out at that point, would you would like to see it enforced while the lawsuit plays out?
I would. I personally would.
Does this feel like the beginning of, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that Albuquerque has not seen what Minneapolis, for instance, has seen. Does this feel like the Trump administration's eye is now turning to Albuquerque, turning to New Mexico? Could this be the beginning of something more substantial?
I don't know if I'd go that far. I mean, if we recall the first Trump administration, they actually did send law enforcement beyond. It was very, very visible. We're nowhere near that. I don't know. I think public opinion towards the Trump administration in general is changing drastically, which I think will affect a lot how they behave. We've got the midterms coming up. We'll see how that plays out. So, are they eyeing Albuquerque more? Maybe. I don't see a lot of changes outside of this
This
lawsuit.
doesn't feel like a flare to pay attention to.
Me personally, no. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
What are you hearing from your constituents, if anything?
No, we hear quite a bit. Supportive of our actions, wishing we would do more to protect citizens. You know, Albuquerque's demographics are predominantly people of color. You know, something like 50% Hispanic. You know, very large immigrant communities here. I think party-wise, we're Democrat by far. So, you know, broad appeal for us to do actions such as these.
What are you hearing from folks who are in Albuquerque without legal status, and what would you like to say to them in light of this lawsuit?
There is fear, of course. You know, fear of being able to go to work, fear of just going to school. You know, we're here. My job and the job of the other city officials is to protect our citizens, make sure they can go just live a normal life, right? Go to school, go to work, take care of your kids, call 911 if there's an emergency. That's our job, and we're doing everything we can within the bounds of the law to do that.
What's your message to them if they're feeling scared?
Reach out to us. 100% call my office. We are working with a lot of groups, a lot of attorneys to protect our folks.
Okay. Do you see the need, I mean, you mentioned that your constituents are calling for it. Do you see the need for additional regulation having to do with immigration enforcement?
I think we're getting there. I think we can always be proactive. It's our job to be proactive, given the state of affairs. So I think we're there, working with our county and state partners as well to kind of be in line, which I think we've done.
Because in some ways this ordinance was getting into alignment with not only the Bernalillo County's version of it, but also the Immigrant Safety Act at the state level.
Exactly. We're not, you know, as much as, you know, it's just Albuquerque. We work with others, other entities, other governmental entities, and so it's important to work together. You know, we're New Mexico. No, I don't have anything on that just yet. We'll see how things go. As things progress, maybe we find more gaps, or maybe there is something we need to do. But as of right now, I don't have anything.
All right, City Councilor Joaquin Baca, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.